Alright, it's working. Okay, my name is LumberjackCheese. This is my first video. I'm gonna go unedited and just pull things from the top. First, let's make some, definitions about who I am. I am first and foremost a human. Jeez, human with horrible handwriting. I'm a human. I'm a man. I work. I think. And I have the 5 other senses that we all have. Great. Okay. See if we can get this angle to record better. This is really not ideal. Let's see if it'll focus like this. There we go. That's a horrible angle. Okay, I'm a human, I'm a man, I work, I think, and I have 5 senses. The reason why I created this channel is I wanted to share what I think about, because I think I have a good way of living, and I think it's worth it to share with other people good ways to live too. That it's just not all, volatility and chaos and nihilism or religion or, feeling hopeless. There is a way out. And I want to kind of explain how you can go from, no one teaches you how to be happy or how to be sad or angry or disgusted, however you spell disgusted. There we go. Disgusted. With doing S right there. In a good way. In a way that is good. If you've ever taken anthropology, you know that one thing that is very core to the field of anthropology is to make what is familiar foreign and what is foreign familiar. And a good way to think about this or imagine this in your head is to say that I am an alien and I'm on Earth. I'm on Earth, this big, rotating ball that is Earth. And that my purpose here is to experience what it is like to be a human. Otherwise, to experience humanity. That is the goal, essentially. The goal is to experience humanity. Now, what does it mean to experience humanity? Well, to experience humanity, I would say, and this is my way of living that is good, is to experience humanity is to experience everything and everything good and bad. In other words, every bad experience is something to be cherished, is something to almost like and enjoy in the way that it should be experienced, which can be through happiness, sadness, anger, disgust, all the variety of emotions. These are very basic ones, obviously, but you can have more detailed ones like melancholy. But to enjoy that, to enjoy being angry, to enjoy being sad, to almost embrace the human experience. Embrace the humanity of it all. And that is the broad kind of spectrum of conversation that I want to have here, in addition to various other, kind of, outside topic conversations where most of it will be here, obviously, but some of them will be here, some of them will be here, some of them will be here, and some of them will touch others. But all of it comes down to a frame of thinking that is good for you, that is beneficial. Okay, now what do I mean by beneficial? What is beneficial? Because I think that I have a different definition than a lot of people. What is good for you is not always beneficial. What is bad for you is not always unbeneficial. There we go. Let's get the I in there. So in other words, beneficial is subjective. It is subjective. It is not objective. That is what I believe is beneficial. And I think what is beneficial, which can be many things, but is mostly for the human experience, is how to be well adjusted to your culture. Except for we can't use this word. In anthropology, we have to use the word society. And that'll be important later when we talk about the ground rules for a good human experience, at least the way I have lived it. Okay, so now that we've center masked kind of the argument, what I'm going to propose to you guys is, kind of out of the blue, some ground rules for the way I live. This is totally optional. I've gone down numerous rabbit holes and they're my own. And you don't have to have any of these. You can kind of cherry pick. In fact, that is the point, is to cherry pick from these videos things that you can use that are beneficial to you, that aren't always the right way to do things, but a good way to do things that end up putting you in a better position than you were before. That's ultimately the goal. Rule one I have is religion is mythology. And, there's a lot of books explaining why, but if you're an atheist and you have certain arguments about why God does this, why God does that, why God thinks this. If God is this, God is that, what does that mean? It would benefit you to cut to the bread and butter and just to say that religion is as mythological as, the Greeks with, Zeus, Hades, or to say that, paganism, that is religion. I have lived most of my life without God. But also I'd argue that regardless of whether God is real or not is actually also irrelevant. Also irrelevant to living. I'm not going to put that here because this is my personal journal. The second one is connection through others gives purpose. Now this is not just human specific. This is also animal specific. This is creature specific. If you're a tree hugger, this is tree specific. But it's mostly connection through others gives you purpose. Okay, humans are a social race, a social species. We are not meant to be alone. And you can figure that out because if you put someone in solitary confinement without sun, one, if they don't have sun, they're just going to want to, die because that's horrible. You don't have any vitamin D and that's basically suffering. But also, loneliness drives you crazy. Your brain will drive you crazy because there's no one else around to share the experience with you, to bounce back, to get feedback from. In other words, to devoid your brain of its senses and some of the programs or the purposes of parts of the brain is to drive your basically your computer nuts, to basically just drown it in water at that point because it's going to kill itself. It's going to drown. It's going to explode. The third one is that happiness can always be created. At any point in your life, no matter what is happening, you can always be happy. That is one of the first rules that has helped me on this journey is that at any point in your time, no matter what, your brain can always choose to be happy, okay? And ultimately, that is one of the most valuable things you can have, because life is not about, I'm going to add a new rule, there is no cause and effect. There's no cause and effect, but there is. There is cause and effect. And, I always agree with you that there is, but it doesn't benefit you to believe that. And that is something to go on in later videos. The fourth rule is work keeps you healthy, okay? You have people who sit at home all day, don't do anything, doom scroll, will sit in their room, have, the blinds closed, and not do anything. And that's a lot of my generation, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, is one, you have intellectual work and you have physical work. You need physical work to help the brain work. And you need the brain to work to help the physical, because the mind, we're going to do this, parentheses, mind and body influence each other. And what you're going to notice is that this contradicts, there is no cause and effect. That is because there are times where this is true and false. That is because the way the world works, the way organisms are independent variables that can change, for a lot of reasons, for a lot of strange reasons that don't make sense logically, is because what is true and what can be false don't always apply to the same situations, because there are different contexts. And those contexts are important, obviously. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. I think most of you guys can understand why. But there are people out there in the world that can't process this, that can't process, you have black, you have white, but then you have gray, right? And if you live with black and white and no gray, you are missing out on, different ways of thinking. It's almost like you're crippling yourself. And a lot of it can be coping mechanisms. A lot of it can be a lot of it can be actual brain deficiencies, people who don't understand. There's a lot of reasons. But if you can live mostly in the gray zone and occasionally in the black and white zone for lots of reasons, you're going to benefit more than doing the opposite, which is to live in the black and white more than you live in the gray. Okay. The fifth kind of works into the fourth, which is that thought keeps you strong. What this means, though, is critical thinking will give you superpowers. And there's a book called The Courage to be Disliked, which I'm not going to write here, but you should read it. And if you can embrace the teachings, if you can think critically, and you can do as it teaches you, you will basically be giving yourself superpowers to, the human brain, unlocking that limitation. The sixth one is that technology will cripple your mind. Not can, it will. You have, what I find is that the more technology I use and that other people use to their detriment is the result, is the cause. I think, this is what I believe, is that information and knowledge actually hurts the human mind, because if you don't have the information readily available and you aren't able to steep on something long enough to prepare you for the next part of the equation that you can't see until later on, which is something that I can't explain to you if you haven't experienced that yourself. You are not ready for different parts of the equation. It's like not being able to be ready, for multiplication, right? When you're at addition, not being ready for, subtraction when you're at addition, just like how you aren't ready for multiplication when you're at subtraction. It's like 1, 2, 3. And it can take a long time before you can process that. And I'm going to add another rule, which is to trust your brain. A lot of people don't trust their brain. In fact, they find reasons not to trust their brain. We'll get on that later. The next one is Labels don't mean anything. I mean, that's like self-help 101. Labels don't mean anything. Don't believe in labels. Don't attach them. They don't help you. The only reason that they will help you is if you can label something, but know in the context that doesn't mean anything, but that you're going to label it anyway, just because you want to, just because you can. That's a good way to do it that won't wreck basically your future processes. The next one is, well, this one's totally optional just because I'm journaling and I'm reading a bunch. Um, but now we get to these two. There is no cause and effect. It benefits you to think that, because what you want is to believe that there is always an end goal, right? An end goal to things, not the start. To believe that the start determines the end instead of the end is the combined processes of the start, the middle, the middle later, the middle later to the end part. Because as humans, we can never know the end. We are not allowed to know. That's just part of, the universe that we live in. We can't know the end, right? But if you say that the start equals the end, you don't add up all of this to equal that. You have to add up all of this to this. So when you do cause and effect, you say jump from here to here, right? That basically ignores the gray, the black and white. Black start, white end. Black start, white end. The gray gives you the shade, gives you the color, right? Red, green, blue, when you add them together, what's the color? That's the end goal. But you have to focus on this and not necessarily this, right? Another thing we'll talk about later on, hopefully, as I review this video and try and get more video ideas in the future, we'll just see where it goes, is that you'll see so many of these end parts and these gray parts, these white parts and these gray parts, that you can almost see yourself. This is metacognition. See your brain, right? We'll do this, braining. You're going to see your brain braining, right? So when you see yourself, oh, this is red. Oh, this is blue. Oh, this is green. This is the end color, right? And then that happens, like, let's say 20 times, right? You already know. And so now you can actually, manipulate this scenario that you're in because you have this little guy. This is metacognition. This is, serious introspection. A lot of people want to be here. This will give them superpowers, but not a lot of them do. There are people in this world who assume that people know what they know without thinking about how they're assuming that they do, and they just think that it automatically routes. And part of that is because part of the way our brain works is like a highway of cars. I'm explaining a lot of ideas, okay? And if you can't follow along, that's totally fine. If you can, you're in a great place. You can think of the brain and how we think as highways, right? So, you get on the highway, you get off the highway, right? You have this little part right here. We'll draw little boundaries. So, you have this where traffic is going this way. They come up the ramp, they go down. If they want to get on the highway, this is the way that it's going. If you want to enter or exit, same on the opposite side, right? So you can think, oh, that's a car crash. We're just going to imagine that this arrow is entering the highway. You can think of the brain as when you use a neural pathway, the highway gets bigger. You have a bigger highway, right? And these are ideas, these are beliefs, these are thoughts, and values that you have that you build over time, concrete, right? When you're really young, you have very small highways, and you have a lot of them, and you have a very few amount of big highways, right? But as you get older, it switches where you have a lot of big highways, but not very many small highways that can be developed, which is why it's harder. Which is why they say that dogs can't learn new tricks. It's not true, because what happens when a highway that's big, isn't being used anymore? It degrades. No one's taking care of it. It breaks down, needs repairs, and people are, repairing and fixing. Guess what? Smaller roads, right? These are the ones, I'm going to draw the dotted line where you have 2 lanes, and it's about, you know, realizing that as you grow older, especially if you're in your 20s, you're Gen Z, or you're a millennial, or you're a boomer, or you're at Gen Alpha, doesn't matter. You can always make the shift from a small road, small neural pathway, an idea, which is what we needed to define, you know, neural synapses, patterns, right? You have point A, point B, point C can be like, I like bacon, for example. And it doesn't matter if this has neurological relevance, because the idea is to first construct this in your head and then use what you know to tweak it, to define it, and find something in your head that is good for you to imagine. It's good for you to imagine I like bacon as being a bunch of, synapses in your brain activating, especially if you're non-religious, or if you are religious, it'll also benefit you. But that's something for you to decide yourself, right? So old dogs can always learn new tricks. Why? Because new roads can always become highways, and highways can always become new roads. So if you're an addict, right, of something, the problem with addiction is that this highway, in your brain can last 20 years still being repaired, even though there's no traffic, which is why when there is new traffic, it says, oh, this highway is being used again. We should repair it. And so it is repaired. And that's what happens when you relapse, is suddenly, one car realizes, hey, you know, this highway 1, right? Let's see if you can see it. You can't even see it. Great. Okay, let's move this up just a little bit. My apologies, guys. Highway 1 has a lot. Okay, you can't see it. Lot of traffic. Capital I for no reason. Let's go to Highway 2, which is addiction. That has, 0 traffic. Can you see that? Yes, you can, right? But the idea is to say, hold on, we don't want to be addicted. Let's put a barrier here. Let's have police, which is the conscience, here to say, no, you cannot go to Highway 2, even though there's a lot of traffic in Highway 1. We are saying no to that. You have to wait until the highway gets bigger. You can't use this. We're trying to break it down. No one can use it. And if someone gets in there, then it justifies it, and then it starts the whole process all over again. We don't want it there. And that's the hard part about it, and that's why will have multiple relapses, is when, the police in your head that's trying to stop this. If you read, it's not okay to be a cannibal, this is that whole concept. You know, people will relapse so many times, and it's when the police say, we've had enough, no one's getting through, no exceptions, no matter what. That's it. We're done. And that's when Highway 2, the sign that says you can enter closes down for good. No one remembers it. It's gone. That's addiction. So now that we covered like 71 different broad topics, part of how we arrived here in the beginning is also kind of what I want to, help you guys teach yourselves. How would you guys get to these beliefs? This is very like hyper growth mindset, and there are different plateaus that unlock new levels, but it's about steeping on this for so long that your brain just thinks in new creative ways. So it's saying like, this is level 1, this is level 2, level 3, level 4, and you won't ever know that there's a level 4 or level 3 or level 2, right? Because it's like a fog of war with your head, and hard to digest ideas. And they're not hard to digest because they're difficult. They're hard to digest because they have, like a brewing timer. You know how like when you drink alcohol and it's in your system, you just have to like wait to be sober. You can't just like be sober, you know, unless you have like an IV bag like they do in the military, to like just clean the blood. So you had to almost like let your brain ferment and culture itself, so that it can reach new levels of fermenting and culturing, uh, to unlock greater concepts. Which one really hard concept is, I'll write it right here so you can see it: post modern illusionism. And what that is it's the void. It's the void. And if you're not prepared, if you're not used to it, it's like looking into the void and just like wanting to almost die. It's nihilism packaged up in like a spiky box. And, but you also have to match it with metacognition, metacog, because there's not enough room on this page now, and introspection, introspect, not a G, shen. And that has to be paired with, um, you know, wanting to experience humanity good. You know, wanting a good experience of humanity that is informed. And, you know, you really only have one life. So, why would you live a human life, you know, and not want to enjoy it? Which is a very human way of phrasing, you know, that way of thinking. Um, you know, when you're as far down as I am, that's something that you would want to say. And, you know, I'll say want a lot, and that's for, you know, a good reason. Um, that I don't think I've explained in depth enough. That'll probably be a whole video. You have to pair it with the desire to uh, live, I guess, live the human experience. Yeah, don't worry about the writing, just kind of focus on the words, the audio. Okay, so this is video 1 unedited, and we'll see you next time.